Hello, and welcome back to the Fireside Lit Book Club, a quiet, candlelit corner of the internet where we read slowly, think deeply, and speak authentically about our experiences. I'm Lindsay, and I invite you to join me by the fire as we explore the soul of a book, the beauty it reveals, the questions it asks, and the ways it helps us understand life, identity, and meaning just a little more clearly. Today, in honor of my daughter's first birthday coming up in just a few days, I wanted to share a really exciting gift idea I have that will extend from her first birthday until her 18th birthday and just a little bit beyond. I was looking at my wall-length bookshelves a few months ago and admiring my collection of books that I've very assiduously curated over the years. For me, collecting books is a labor of love, and it's a hobby that I would love to share with my daughter someday if she inherits that love. And my eyes were drawn to some of the shelves I still have that are totally blank. And I imagined at that moment reserving those shelves for my daughter's books so she would have her own space for her own collection at some point. And then I had this idea. What if every year on my daughter's birthday, I gifted her a really beautiful edition of a book I found to be meaningful during my own childhood? What if I gave her the gift of words? I can think of no better gift to hand my daughter than a relevant book for that specific time in her life to hopefully grow her imagination, inspire her, and help her navigate the joys, struggles, and complexities of life. When I was growing up, I read so widely and so often, and there was honestly nothing that made me happier than holding a really good book in my hands. I was sensitive, very emotional, and very imaginative. And when you put this combo together, you inevitably need some sort of an outlet. And that's exactly what books were to me. They provided me with experiences I was too young to live yet, but was endlessly curious about and thirsty for. And they left me with the sensation of relief that I was not alone. I think the process of growing up, especially these days, can be one of the most trying parts of life as you struggle to figure out where you fit in and who you're going to be. And books for me always served as an invaluable roadmap, one that was actually handed to me by my own mother, who read to me every night throughout my childhood until well into my middle school years. The stories I encountered seemed to suggest a world of endless possibilities, and I want that for my daughter as she grows into the amazing woman I know she will one day become. So after giving it a little bit of thought, I compiled a list of books that I felt were the very best and age-appropriate selections for each year of her life. They emphasize themes of imagination, courage, curiosity, tenacity, identity, and love. It is the greatest hope of my life that my daughter will grow into someone who embodies these things because they are the very things that make life worth living. I have, in this first year of her life, realized that I have basically zero expectations for who she should become or what she should do with her life, only that she lives a life of purpose, is unafraid to chase her dreams, believes in herself, and believes in and is good to other people. And each year on her birthday, I hope I present her with a book that helps mold and shape that little girl I love so much into the very best, fullest version of herself. In many ways, this list of books is a love letter to my daughter, and I'm excited to share it with you all around the fire tonight. Without further ado, here are 20 books for my daughter in honor of each year of her childhood, plus 2 bonus books. For my daughter's first birthday, I selected the nursery rhyme book. It is the simplest and the most foundational of the books on this list, with an emphasis on rhythm, repetition, and the earliest shape of story. I wanted my daughter's first real book, aside from the endless number of board books she's accumulated over this last year, to be one that celebrates language before words even fully form, that honors the music in syllables, the joy in sound, and the delight in her little imagination waking up. And these verses that we're so familiar with, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, Humpty Dumpty Sat on a Wall, they're timeless for a reason. They teach us pattern and surprise. They teach us that language can dance. I still remember being read nursery rhymes when I was tiny, with the cadence of my mom's voice soothing me, the pictures telling half the story, and the rhythm helping me learn that books were safe and fun places. What I hope my daughter takes away from this book is that story begins in sound, that learning to listen is as important as learning to read, and that her voice, even before she has full sentences, matters, and that there is magic in rhyme, repetition, and in words that feel like music. I hope this book becomes the first of many that she comes back to years later and smiles at, not just for the words, but hopefully for the mother-daughter memory tied to it. Us together opening its pages, listening, laughing, and feeling the world of little stories begin. For her second birthday, I selected the book The Velveteen Rabbit by Marjorie Williams. And this is a book that's really near and dear to my heart. It is probably one of the earliest memories I have of reading, and definitely it's a story that continues to tug at my heart to this day. It was originally included in a collection of nighttime stories that my mother read to me when I was little, and I actually still have that collection of stories. I've begun actually sharing some of them with my daughter, but out of all of them, The Velveteen Rabbit has always stood out. It's a story about a stuffed bunny who is so beloved by a little boy that he one day becomes real, because love is that transformative. I hope my daughter learns from this story that love changes us from the inside out. It makes us softer, braver, and more alive. The Velveteen Rabbit in the story learns that becoming real doesn't mean being perfect. It means being loved even when you're worn, faded, and flawed. I hope she always knows that her worth will never depend on appearances or perfection, but on how open her heart is to loving and being loved. For her third birthday, I picked Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne. I just think there's something so timeless about the world of the 100-Acre Wood. Its gentle humor, its warmth, its friendships, and loyalty. Every character represents something true about human nature, from Pooh's quiet wisdom and simplicity to Piglet's courage and Eeyore's melancholy tenderness. Oh, how I loved Eeyore as a kid. I just wanted to cheer him up and make him feel better. But what I love so much about Winnie the Pooh is that it celebrates small joys, from, a shared pot of honey to a walk in the woods and small everyday adventures with friends. And I hope my daughter takes away from this that life doesn't have to be big or loud to be beautiful, that kindness, patience, and friendship are more valuable than anything else, and that even when she feels uncertain or small, there will always be people who love her exactly as she is. For her fourth birthday, I picked The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, which I believe is probably one of the most profound stories ever written for both children and adults. Its gentle philosophical tone reminds us that what truly matters is often invisible to the eye. The prince's travels, his friendship with the fox, and his love for the rose each represent the sacred responsibility that comes with caring deeply for someone or something. For my daughter, I hope this book teaches her that imagination and wonder are forms of wisdom, that seeing the world with the heart, not just with the eyes, is the truest way to live, and that love, when genuine, requires tending and patience, like the rose shall one day understand herself to be. For my daughter's fifth birthday, I selected the complete Grimm's fairy tales. And some of my best memories I have of reading are of reading fairy tales, from The 12 Dancing Princesses, which was always my personal favorite. I think I read this story I don't even know, upwards of 50 times when I was growing up, to Beauty and the Beast, to Rumpelstiltskin, to Rapunzel. It was a toss-up here between choosing Grimm's fairy tales and Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales for her fifth birthday book, which I incidentally bought, by the way, at the Strand in New York a few months before I got pregnant. Ironic timing there. I just kind of thought, when I have a baby, I'll read this to them. And it wasn't even something my husband and I were talking a lot about at the time. I just had this weird pull to buy Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales for my future hypothetical child. But even despite that story, I ultimately am going with Grimm's fairy tales as her actual birthday gift because I was a bigger fan of those stories myself as a child, and I want to share them with her in a special way. I hope that as she grows, she'll see that fairy tales are more than magic and monsters. They're lessons in bravery, resilience, and moral choice. Beneath every enchanted forest and talking animal lies the quiet reminder that even in the darkest moments, light can be found through courage and kindness. For her sixth birthday, I picked the book Heidi by Joanna Spyri, and I loved this book growing up. Heidi is such a wholesome and heartwarming story about joy, simplicity, and belonging. It's about a little girl who brings light and laughter to everyone she meets, which honestly already reminds me of my daughter so much, even the character's gruff grandfather in the mountains. I chose this book because it captures the beauty of nature and the innocence of childhood so perfectly. I hope my daughter learns from Heidi that happiness often grows from the simplest things: mountain air, compassion, and love freely given. And that even when life takes her away from the places she loves, the goodness she carries within her can brighten any home she finds herself in. For her 7th birthday, I was really excited to select The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. I absolutely love this author, although I'm ashamed to admit beyond The Secret Garden and the book that I will introduce next for her 8th birthday, I actually am not too sure of what else she writes. That would be interesting to look into. But I was entranced by this story when I was a little girl. I was always so drawn to secrets and mysteries, and with The Secret Garden specifically, the whole notion of a hidden little boy kept essentially in a box of a room due to his fragile health was fascinating to me. And looking back as an adult, I now understand the parallels between his fragile health and death and the regrowth of the garden in the novel, as well as the rebirth of this invalid little boy who regains a relationship with his father and restores his family's secret garden to its former glory with the main character Mary and their friend Dickon. What I hope my daughter takes from this story is that healing can be slow, quiet, and often unseen, like the first green shoots breaking through the soil. Sometimes the things we care for most tenderly, whether gardens or people, are what bring us back to life. And I know I did a little bit of a sneak peek into what this 8th birthday book would be, but I selected A Little Princess, also by Frances Hodgson Burnett. And this was one of my all-time favorite stories as a young girl. I loved both the book and the 1995 film adaptation because I saw a lot of parallels between myself and the main character growing up. I had a very similar imagination, and so I was totally captivated by the idea that this main character, Sarah, could bring entire situations to life with her spellbinding stories. I was also a daddy's girl growing up, so I was especially moved by Sarah's relationship to her father, and I was always torn up by the end of the book when he returns from the war and initially does not remember her after a traumatic brain injury. What I hope my daughter takes from this story is that grace and dignity matter most when life feels unfair. That true nobility doesn't come from wealth or title, but from how kindly you treat others, even when you have nothing left to give. For her 9th birthday, I selected Peter Pan by James Matthew Barrie because I believe that in many ways, Peter Pan celebrates the wild magic of childhood better than any other story. That fleeting, golden time when the world still feels enchanted and every day holds the possibility for adventure. I hope my daughter reads this play and remembers that growing up doesn't mean losing her imagination. The ability to play, to dream, and to believe in impossible things, that's something worth holding on to forever. For her 10th birthday, I selected Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. This book is such a celebration of curiosity and absurdity. The idea that asking questions, even the nonsensical ones, leads to discovery. Alice reminds us that wonder and confusion can exist side by side, and that sometimes the strangest paths are the ones that teach us the most. I hope my daughter learns that curiosity is never something to suppress, even when the world seems bewildering. For her 11th birthday, I picked Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. And what I love so much about this novel is it's not only about relationships, but it's about cultivating identity. Each of the sisters in the story has a very distinct personality and leaves her mark on her sisters and her community by allowing that personality, with all its gifts, to shine through. I hope my daughter grows to understand that she never has to suppress who she is to be loved or accepted. That her individuality is her greatest gift, and that, like Jo March, the main character, she can be brave enough to follow her own voice even when it leads her off the beaten path. For her 12th birthday, I selected the book The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. I believe this book is so important because it's a testament to resilience, hope, and humanity even in the darkest of times. I hope that when my daughter reads it, she not only understands history, but also the strength of the human spirit, that kindness and faith and goodness can persist even in unthinkable circumstances. I loved Anne's diary from the first time I read it, also around the same age. I believe I was in 5th grade. But I always felt that it evokes a deep sense of empathy when you realize this little girl grew up in a world where it was unsafe to even look out the window just for being a different race, for your long-held beliefs and traditions that simply made you who you were. Anne reminds us that courage doesn't have to be loud or visible. Sometimes it's the simple decision to keep believing in people, to keep writing, and to keep dreaming of peace. For her 13th birthday, I selected the book To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. This is the age when empathy really begins to deepen, and I think this story invites exactly that. The character of Atticus Finch shows us that courage often looks like quiet integrity, doing what's right even when it's neither easy nor popular. And Scout, his daughter, teaches us that growing up means learning to see through others' eyes. At 13, the world begins to feel more complicated, full of contradictions and moral gray areas. To Kill a Mockingbird helped me through that transition with tenderness and truth. It teaches that real bravery isn't found in grand gestures, but often in simply standing calmly and compassionately in the face of injustice, in doing the right thing when everyone is watching and when no one is watching. I hope my daughter sees that goodness doesn't require perfection, and that listening, really listening to another person's experience is one of the greatest forms of love. I hope she carries that lesson with her, and that she internalizes that empathy is not weakness, but strength, the foundation of every just and gentle world. For her 14th birthday, I selected The Perks of Being a Wallflower, because this book captures the raw, confusing intensity of adolescence, I think so perfectly in just one compact novel. I hope my daughter finds comfort in knowing that feeling deeply is not a weakness, but a superpower. And looking back, I really wish someone had told me this when I was growing up. Vulnerability, sensitivity, and self-discovery are not phases to outgrow, but the essence of becoming fully human. There's something so striking about this author's writing, how he distills the loneliness and magic of being a teenager into moments that feel both small and infinite. And, there's the famous quote, "We accept the love we think we deserve," which has stayed with me for decades, always in the back of my mind throughout various relationships I've had. And I hope my daughter remembers it when she begins to love and be loved, that she never settles for anything less than kindness, respect, and real connection. And then, of course, there's the unforgettable line that makes the book feel almost transcendent. "In that moment, I swear we were infinite." I hope she has experiences that allow her to feel that way, whether it's found in certain friendships, songs, and late-night memories, all of which have the power to make you feel limitless, even if just for a moment. At 14, life can feel enormous, with every joy and heartbreak magnified. I hope this book reminds her that she's not alone in that intensity, that her sensitivity is her strength, her voice matters, and that even in her quietest moments, she is part of something vast and beautiful. For her 15th birthday, I selected the book Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. I love this book. It's one of my favorites to this day. And this masterpiece is a love letter to books themselves, a warning about what happens when we stop thinking critically. I hope my daughter sees this book as a call to protect her own mind and to never stop questioning. Words matter. Ideas matter. The freedom to learn, to think, and speak are among the most premier rights of being human. At 15, you begin to notice how the world tries to shape your thoughts, what to believe, what to care about, what to silence. And I think Fahrenheit 451 is a reminder that knowledge and independent thought are sacred. It's about the danger of comfort without curiosity, of distraction without depth. In a world that often encourages conformity, this story reminds us to think for ourselves. To this day, still one of my all-time favorites, and remains especially relevant in an age where so many of the basic freedoms we once took for granted are now being threatened. For my daughter's 16th birthday, I selected the book Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. And I first read this one for an English lit class when I was, you guessed it, 16 years old. And this is another one of my favorites, even today. Because I was such a passionate romantic teenager, I found I was totally sucked into Kathy and Heathcliff's torrid, albeit dysfunctional affair, and it ultimately served as an outlet for me at the time where I could entertain that part of me that idealized love and romance. I also feel that the story is a phenomenal example of how powerful feelings, even with the best of intentions, can take a dark twist and of what not to normalize in relationships. I hope my daughter takes from this book an understanding that love should never diminish or consume you, that passion and pain are not the same thing, and that the healthiest love stories are the ones that allow you to remain wholly yourself. For my daughter's 17th birthday, I selected the book Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. And I read this book when I was a bit older than 17, but it's actually a story I've loved for most of my life. I saw the Broadway musical and absolutely loved the songs from the time I was in middle school. But it was only actually upon reading the book that I arrived at a place of perpetual admiration and total awe for the main character, Jean Valjean. I fangirl over this man. To this day, across all of the books I've read in my life, I can confidently say he stands out as the most moral, most courageous, and the most selfless. I don't even have sufficient adjectives to describe him, but the character that Victor Hugo develops remains unmatched in outstanding attributes, even more than 150 years after he was written into life. What I hope my daughter learns from this story is that redemption is always possible, that no mistake is too great to grow from. I want her to see in Jean Valjean an example of integrity, forgiveness, and moral courage, and to believe that one life lived with compassion can ripple outward to change countless others. Finally, I want her to fully know and internalize after reading this book that to love another person is to see the face of God, which if you don't know, that's actually a lyric in the finale of the Broadway show, which I really, really hope to share with her one day. That experience would be really special. For her 18th birthday, I selected Emerson's Essays and Lectures, even more than Henry David Thoreau, who I would argue is probably the more renowned of the two and the more widely read. I thoroughly love Ralph Waldo Emerson, and I got so much out of his essay collection when I first read it several years ago. I believe his words contain valuable truths about how to live intentionally, connected to nature and to something beyond yourself, yet always relying on and believing principally in yourself. I could imagine no more fitting book for a young woman entering adulthood and still trying to hone these essential life skills. I hope she learns that the quietest strength comes from within, from trusting her instincts, thinking independently, and walking confidently in her own direction. That her worth will never come from external approval, but from the self-respect she cultivates by living authentically. For the two bonus books that I selected, these will be for her high school graduation, and one of them is A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf, and something called the Apples of Gold poetry book, which I will explain in just a minute. So with A Room of One's Own, I felt it provided such a powerful and inspirational message to young, educated women to make their own way in the world, and most of all, make the time and money necessary to support their passions. Woolf speaks of writing specifically, but I think this message can be broadly applied to any career path or vocation. I hope my daughter sees Woolf's words not only as a call to independence, but as an invitation to create, to find the room, literal or metaphorical, where she feels most herself. Whether that's writing, painting, studying, or building something entirely new, I want her to know she has the right to take up space in the world. And lastly, and emotionally for me, my father actually gifted me a special book of poetry and sayings for my own high school graduation that his parents gifted to him for his graduation. It's called Apples of Gold by Joe Petty. I believe it is a pretty obscure little book that few people have probably heard about, but it was also exceedingly meaningful to me from the moment I flipped over the front cover and saw my grandparents' inscription to my dad decades earlier, and then his inscription to me. It contains many pages of wise and beautiful sayings that I found to be precious and applicable to life, and that I hope my daughter will derive personal meaning from as well. I hope even beyond her that it's a book she will one day gift to my grandchild if she goes on to have children. And maybe in that full circle moment, she'll understand that books are more than paper and ink. They're bridges between generations and proof that love, once given, never really ends. So that's the list. 20 books for 18 years, plus 2 bonus gifts that mean the world to me. If my daughter remembers nothing else from this tradition, I hope she knows this, that stories matter. They shape who we are, how we love, and what we believe is possible. Thank you as always for joining me by the fire. Until next time, be well, read deeply, and love fiercely.